right. Everybody stayed around for this last session. Thank you all for joining us for Burger and Cheese. We'll get into that a little bit later. My name is Jennifer Hicks, and I'm a senior tech contributor at Forbes. And I have with me today two fantastic CEOs that could not be more different, in my opinion, two entirely different companies, two entirely different approaches. So I'd be very pleased to introduce to you Antoine Hubert. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. And he is the CEO of Insect. And then also Olivier Pomel, the CEO of Datadog. I think you're two separate sides here, right? And Antoine, are you in France at the moment?
Yeah, in Paris.
That's great. And Olivier is in New York, is that right?
Yes, I'm in New York, sunny New York.
Yay. So one of the things I love about this panel so much, Burger and Cheese, we know is supposed to be about like American burger and cheese, France, but I love these two companies so much because they're so different and their approaches to the US and being in the US market were very different. So what I thought I would do is just tell you a little bit about them and then jump right into this conversation. Now, Insect has over 350 million in venture capital. Is that right, Antoine?
Yeah, a bit more, 400, but
400, yeah. And they have recent funding from Robert Downey Jr.'s fund, so congratulations to you guys. And Olivier, you guys went on NASDAQ last year in 2019, is that correct?
That's right, yep.
Yep, and I saw today your stock is up again, so congratulations.
Yes, always good news.
Yes, always good news.
When the day starts, it's going to go up or down.
Yeah, right. That's 3 days in a row it's up, so congratulations. What I thought I would do is start maybe go in a little bit backwards here because we've had so much change in this landscape today with COVID and the pandemic and immigration and all the things going on. And in September 2020, there was an article in Sifted that said that the routes to the US had changed dramatically for French companies. An index was saying that between 2015 and 19, in fact, 1/3 of French startups had dropped down to 1/3. Had not come to the US. And so what I wanted to ask you guys, since this is a dramatically different landscape than when you started 10 years ago, how do you think these changes would affect a French startup's approach to coming to the US? And would that change how they would think about coming here? Or does that depend on the type of company that they have? Anybody want to jump in and answer that one?
Yeah, I think look, I mean, it's always been important, at least in our field, like in B2B, it's always been important for companies, French companies, to get on in the US market. I think we can discuss that, in ample details if you want, but, the market is just so big and so much more permissive for startups that you can't avoid going there. I think a big part of coming to the US market is you need to move here, you need to build a team here, you need to start building credibility in person. So it's definitely harder in the times of COVID to do that. In a way, everybody is in equal place because everybody's remote, but it's much harder to start building credibility. So I think maybe it's a short-term issue.
Yeah. What do you think, Antoine?
I think it's the same in our sector, food and ag. Europe is really strong. You can build a very big thing there, but the US is still the largest market in ag and in food, almost, with China. So you can avoid this market also, and so it's different vertical. But we see how it's booming in the alternative proteins sector in the past 5 years with companies like Impossible Food or Beyond Meat, which has been listed a year ago, and an incredible stock increase, incredible story. So even more today, now that investors show appetite for this kind of new burgers, new proteins, European companies need to be there. So it's what we have been working on in our specific segment of insect proteins in the past 2 years to really understand the market and be there in a good time. So COVID has been maybe a bit delayed things, but we have already an office, and I think all companies need to be in our segment also in the US and North America.
So, but what about the companies that are just starting now, right? If they're seeing this as everybody's adjusting, do you think that they would be looking at these sort of decreased routes to the US and thinking, we can just do it from wherever we are? Is there some sort of, do you think that's you guys are pretty well established, right? But in looking at what would be happening back in France with some of the incubators and the way things have been going there in the ecosystem, do you think maybe their approach is like, we don't really need it?
I don't think anybody thinks they don't need it. I think the question is always how soon can we do it and how well can we do it. In these situations, do what you can. I mean, if it means maybe you'll do something else first, and maybe it means you spend money a little bit less quickly. You're a bit more careful, so you get to keep a bit more runway because it's going to take you more time. Mm-hmm. I know, at our scale, even though we're already established in a number of places, whenever we want to go into a new location or we're looking at building a new team in a new country or acquiring a company in a new country, it's a lot more difficult in the time of COVID because you can't go there. So it's riskier. So there's some things we're postponing a little bit, and some others that we're doing instead of that.
Okay, well let's tell the audience a little bit about how you guys started. Then let's get in the Wayback Machine a little bit and go backwards. So Olivier, let's start with you. So tell your story, because it is quite interesting that you had just moved to New York as a young Frenchman entrepreneur, but you hadn't started the company yet. So you literally started this company boots on ground in New York City. Is that right?
Yeah. So in my case, I actually moved to New York in 1999. So nobody's getting any younger here. I was an engineer. I had my internship at the end of my studies in New York. I thought I would go to New York for 6 months, and I'm still here, 20 years later. So that's what happened. I started working pretty quickly in startups I would say, the tail end of the first .com boom and bust. A lot of things about what was good about startups, a lot of things about what not to do, in a downturn. Then we worked for a startup that worked really well until I started Datadog in 2010. So I was already well established in the US. My co-founder had a very similar background. We actually worked together in many of those companies together. He's also French, even though he doesn't have an accent. Some people tell me I'm the French one, and I say no. Technically, we're both French, but
we'll talk about the French cachet thing later. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is so I was established in the US, and for me, when the question came to go back to France in the early 2000s, it was not really attractive. In terms of startups, in terms of new technologies. The marketplace, I would say the job market wasn't there. There were less opportunities. Most people still went to work for big industrial groups, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there was not enough of a critical mass of entrepreneurship there to. Whereas that's completely changed today. We can also.
If you weren't in engineering, or you weren't doing something in engineering, it probably wasn't a good place for a startup to be. It was still very legacy based.
Yeah, it was. There was less activity. There was less demand for it. There was plenty of things for me to do in New York, even after the .com bust and the September 11 and all that terrible stuff. There was still quite a bit of activity here. I would say today the world has changed quite a bit. If I were to graduate today in France, there would be plenty of opportunities in startups, and we actually see that when we hire people in France. We see a lot more of the graduates of in engineering and other fields that want to work with a startup or start a company.
So that's an interesting change, though, right? And I want to talk to Antoine in a little bit, because his experience is different. But I've lived over there for 15 years and then came back. In that amount of time that was there, I could see in that 15 years the change between the incubators and the accelerators, and of course, also the most important thing I wanted to talk about to you guys was like the attitude, right? To take the risk and be that entrepreneur. So that being said, I want to ask you, Antoine, so you incubated this whole company in France. And so you were part of that growth, from 2010, that big entrepreneurial shift. And so what motivated you? What made you, besides that, the aquaculture and the food industry being very robust there, what drove you to do that in France and start there and stay there?
Oh, my personal story, I never thought I would be entrepreneur 10 years ago. It was just, I founded an NGO. We were environmental activists with friends and trying to promote sustainable food. And at some point we spin off in a startup studio from an NGO, a real for-profit company, Insect, because we wanted to have a positive impact. So we were in France, and we say, okay, how can we make the food system different? And we were convinced insects will play a key role. It's not the only solution, but with plant-based proteins, we'll with reducing food waste, with other sources like algae, insect will be part of the future and a close future. But it's true, it has been quite difficult. We struggle also to do some fundraising on our way, but we have been successful. But since 8 years, I think even the last 3 to 4 years, we have seen a really fast increase in all the seed funding and Serie A in the food and ag, but more broadly about deep tech. And deep tech, you see a lot of investment from BPI in France supporting this. You see Daniel Ek from Spotify now launching a fund to support European deep tech companies. You see Atomico also all over Europe to support these deep tech companies. Deep tech, also tech for good, tech for environment and social benefits are growing a lot in Europe, and there is a lot of funding channels to support the growth of these companies. And it's easier today with more capital than it was even 5 years ago, or even more 8 years ago. So I think I don't say it's easier, but you have more possibilities.
Yeah. I think the market that you're in has just grown exponentially. You look at Ryan Bethencourt out in Silicon Valley, and he was one of the first, people really looking about promoting, meats, cell-grown meats and all the food tech that you're seeing now. So I think that was sort of a sweet spot, and now it's like if you were a French company coming up in this era with all that funding running around for tech for good, do you think they would find an easier path than the path that you found?
I don't think it's always easier. It's always difficult to raise funds and to build your team, but you have more possibilities. You have more funds. You have more support in France and around in UK, in Scandinavia, in Germany, in Spain. So I think there are more possibilities. The ecosystem is more mature about deep tech, especially about food and ag. So you have more investors, you have more talents also interested by these topics. You have more universities working in the field to do applied research to benefit startups. So all the ecosystem gets more mature, but that doesn't mean that we can do everything in Europe again. I think what's changed in the mindset, and we see with French Tech, with the Next 40, where we are part of it, France, I think a lot of entrepreneurs think global today. When they start a company, is to grow global, and it's what we see with colleagues of Next 40, like Open Classroom, like Alan and other friends. They need to think global. So obviously, the US is still part of the story. It's going to be a major market for a lot of companies like us, like China, and maybe different roads, and some entrepreneurs will favor China first before the US. But still, you cannot avoid the US, but you still have the room to grow in France, grow in Europe, and then maybe you have still less competition and then maybe less valuation competition as yourself or founder still in Europe compared to the US, but still you can do something and be more prepared to go to the US at a good time.
Yeah, I want to stop for just a second because I just saw some really incredible comments. I just have to tell you guys, I'm sure they'll kill me for doing this, but literally it's so nice to see this one comment going, burger plus cheese just makes a good burger. I mean, why does it have to be one or the other? Why do we have to stay in these silos of which is better? Because I want to talk, and also you're getting a lot of people on here, by the way, are like, we love insects, so good for you. By the way, thank you everybody for making those comments. And Data Dog too, you got a lot of love here on this page. Let's talk a little bit about this, a little bit lighter note of this French expertise. You see a lot of articles that say, it's the French expertise and they're exporting their French expertise. And I know, Antoine, a lot of articles are written about you. It's like the French cachet has come to America. And I want to talk about that. How would you guys both define that French expertise? Is that education? Is that mindset? Let's talk a little bit about that. Anybody, jump in.
Like for in many sectors, verticals, engineers are really well educated in France. I don't know about the data we leave Olivier, but in agronomy, agriculture, life sciences, we have a lot of very professional engineers, PhDs. We have a deep research in France or nearby in Netherlands. So they or in UK and Germany. So you find talented people, technical people that goes very, very far in science. So for deep tech, this is really excellent. You find also good financial finance for any when you get bank loans, bank credits, because as deep tech company we are building assets. So you are looking also for asset-based financing and not only equity. So this is also a kind of talent we find there. And again, in our case, food and ag, France is one of the most advanced and most renowned country in the world, from the farmers to the chef, the 3-star Michelin chef. All the value chain is really famous, going through the big companies like Danone or Sodexo as retail. So we have everything there. With Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark among the 5 biggest, with then USA and China. So we are really well positioned to develop this kind of companies and access to the talents. But we need all other kind of talents we can find in marketing, maybe always less marketing, communication, and some also capital market access. About IPO is more difficult, maybe in Europe and France. So as you said, is burger with cheese. We if you want to be a global company, be well established in France and Europe, well established in the US, and most likely in other parts of the world.
And what do you think, Olivier, about the French expertise that people talk about? What do you think they're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, it's the pool of engineering talent is very good in France. The education system is very good to produce well-trained engineers. I would say until fairly recently, this was underexploited, as a pool of talent, and I think it's coming to life, in recent years, which is very good. That's why we have a very big engineering presence in France. We hire a lot from there, and it works very well for us. I would say if you were to compare a little bit the talent pools between different countries, there are slightly different cultural biases from the educational system between the US and and France. I would say and again, these are stereotypes, right? So usually people might get from that, but in France, we tend to be a bit more conceptual. In the US, tend to be a bit more practical.
That's a good
and so usually it's good to have the two mix, so you have a mix of practical and conceptual, and that's going back to burger with cheese actually works pretty well.
It does, and I think your point is very valid, because a lot of the things that really bother me about this venture capital market, startup market, as a journalist, is that everybody wants everything they talk in big silos still. Oh, it's French. Oh, it's German. It's European. They'll never be Silicon Valley. But Silicon Valley's been looked at as like it's a state of mind, right? The 3 of us talked about this the other day. So I guess a good question is that Silicon state of mind portable, and are you seeing that state of mind being moved to catching on in these other places like France? I mean, you look at Station F, and you go into Station F in Paris, and wow, it is full of energy and enthusiasm and risk takers, and then you in New York is also this great hub. So what are your feelings on that portability of that Silicon Valley state of mind? Forget the burger thing now. Let's just talk about that.
Yeah, the state of mind is definitely being exploited. Right? It's alive and well in France. It's alive and well in New York too. I mean, it was not here initially as much as it was in the Bay Area, at least for tech companies. So it's really getting exploited. People are living it. We're still early, I would say, in the life of the ecosystem. So you don't necessarily have all the support structure. You don't have all the network of people who have done it 4 times already, and maybe the talent of managers and executives that have managed high growth at scale. It's harder to find. Yeah. But the willingness to do it, the desire for it, the fact that it is being valorized in society, I think all of that is there, and that's very, very good development as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. And Antoine, do you feel the same way?
No, I fully agree. The mindset is there. A company wants to be global. We see again in next 40 companies not to be a unicorn, it's to be a decacorn. And so their willingness, ambition to grow very big, but still the ecosystem is still not as mature as New York, and then still very far from Silicon Valley. I think when you have seen a few weeks ago, the French CEO of Moderna, he said that I have invested 5 billion in the company with my investors, 5 billion to be there without making profits, and it would have been possible in Europe, and since today, I think it's still not possible to be this kind of huge biotech company that requires so much capital that only the US and maybe today China can make this kind of giants and big bets. So it's still, we are in progress. We are progressing very quickly in Europe and in France, but it's still the step is still pretty huge to get to the US maturity compared to the capital market. As you said, Olivier, you need to have teams who have done 10 IPOs and so it's expertise and capital access that still are missing in France and Europe.
Well, there was another article recently that talked about deal flow was down from US investors into French and European companies, but they were saying that this was also a good thing because it would allow maybe some of these venture funds in Europe who were priced out of those rounds to sort of step back up at the plate and put some of their big money behind some of these French startups. And do you think that shift will also now change? Like, because, you know, there was a big trend of a lot of US investment in French companies and European companies. And, you know, that was like, well, you have to come to the US. But now that maybe this is an opportunity for European venture firms to step up with that investment. And do you think that's a shift that we will see change the way maybe some startups approach their rapid, whether or not they come, you know, sooner or rather than later?
I can, quickly, we see this US investors coming to Europe. We have seen some companies, US venture building offices in London for a while, but now we see US investors investing directly in France. It's our case. I see some people from LA. We have Upfront, one of the major LA VC who invested directly in the company, and now they're helping us a lot to develop the business in the US. I have a friend in deep tech also who got Khosla support straight from the Series A 2 years ago, and it was his first investment in France. So we see major Silicon Valley VCs coming also to France to support and do some cross-border deals and be able to help these companies to come in the US at some point. So it's something that is changing also, and that has changed in the past 2 or 3 years. Before, you had to move to the US, the founders build do a shift, a swap with a US company, and now it's not compulsory to do it straight. You can attract US money, but still at the end is to develop the business in the US. We will. I don't hear you, Jennifer.
I was on mute. Thank you. I have some questions popping up on my panel I wanted to ask you from some of the people that are here, but I would agree with you that's also, that doesn't have to be burger or cheese, right? You're really starting to see more of these, like, why should it matter where the investment comes from, even though you know you're going to have to be on the ground? Okay, here's a question for you both. Looking back, what do you wish you had known before starting your companies? Before. That's not even my curveball. That's somebody else's curve.
I think so. That's something we did actually do before starting the company, and I think it was good. My co-founder and I actually thought about starting a company earlier, like way earlier in our career.
Okay.
We didn't do it. We went to work for another startup, and we grew with that startup. I think it was a good move because we made enough of the mistakes we could make about building teams, hiring people, building software. And we also got to understand the problem really, really intimately, which is a problem we ended up solving with Datadog.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's good. I think it's a good path. Like, you start your career, you go and work for a few startups, a few companies. You understand the world, you understand yourself a little bit better. You get some real world experience with some real problems, and then you go fix them.
Okay. What about you, Antoine?
I think we will have onboarded some key expertise earlier in engineering, in construction, in operating farms and factories large scale. That's so complex that we should have maybe identified this. But as the ecosystem is not mature at all. And you have big corporates, you have big food and ag companies, and the connection between this huge giant like Danone, this expertise is not available to small startups. This is something we try to fill up today. There is a big lobbying group called France Industry, and they're trying to connect the very big corporates and the deep tech and industrial startups to try to avoid this lack of expertise when you start, and about regulation also, which is always super complex, especially in food and ag. And when lobbying is key to develop new products and to get, I've seen some question about authorization, market approval. Yeah. We have been working a lot since 5 years about it, and we are filing dossiers right now in the US for many different applications. That's something that like lack of expertise that is maybe something that we missed at the beginning.
But you would only know by knowing through the years and seeing what was happening. So here's another question. What is your strategy to distribute workforce, aka engineering in France and sales and marketing in the US, mixed? Anything you want to share with people on this question? I mean, you guys are two, again, very different companies, so what would be your strategy there without giving too much away?
Well, I mean, on our side, the goal is to be able to hire enough of the right people quickly enough, right? That's what, at the end of the day, what gates the growth of the company is our ability to hire more of the right people, onboard them, make them productive, and then keep them happy so they stay. So for that, it's important to have access to different talent pools. You typically can't do it just in one place. You need to have more shots at it. And you'll see that, or we've seen that some of the talent pools will shut down at different points in time, so there will be like issues like COVID, for example, will have different levels of impact at different points in time on different parts of the world. So in our case, we need to put sales everywhere because we need to go where customers are. So we open sales teams just about everywhere in the world. And for engineering, we've chosen, at this point, we have 3 centers for engineering plus remote. So we have New York, Boston, and Paris. With New York being bigger than Paris, which is much bigger than Boston. And we probably will also keep opening offices. Actually, we're looking into another location in France right now, potentially.
And are you still opening offices during this COVID, during this pandemic this year? Have you still been opening things?
We've been adding people to new locations. We haven't opened brand new offices.
Okay. All right. And Antoine, what's your strategy if you want to share it?
First, we are way less advanced than Olivier, so I'm not there with a dozen of subsidiaries in the world. We are thinking about this, but as we can just see, today we have an office in the US, in Miami, and we have the chief marketing guy. So the marketing obviously is still more advanced in the US. We are developing a new marketing and branding project with US agencies. So we see like the classical pattern when we are developing more marketing topics in the US. And in France, we have more all the rest, the science, etc. for the future, as we will obviously also farm and produce, manufacture in the US. We will have all the operating system also working in the US. But in terms of R&D, we might have regional hubs in different countries. We have the big one building in France now, but in the US, North America, we will have one. We have in South America, in Asia, so we'll build big hubs and spread from there with different partnerships and at some point licensing system. So we have a spread, I would say, knowledge, and the sales on our side is more global. We work with really big companies, so it's that are global channels, and it's less than country per country. So we are dealing directly with the headquarters, and then they have all their SNOP, sales and operation planning. And then they can allocate their demand according to their own factories.
So what I'm hearing is like you guys are very, very attuned to where the expertise is and where to sort of spread that out around the world when you need to spread it out around the world. Now, here's a question that I think we've answered, and I'm not sure if it's a joke, but we'll just bring it up here anyway. How to make a good French burger in the US? So I think I know where they're going with this, or my interpretation of this is that it's just a French burger inside of the US culture, which seems to go against what we were just talking about blending all the good pieces together. But let's try to answer it.
You put good cheese on it.
You put good cheese on it. I like that.
That's an answer. Done.
Next.
So that same.
It comes back to that French expertise, you know. I mean, we talked about this the other day. What makes a good entrepreneur, and in this case, it doesn't necessarily. Maybe the French entrepreneur is about, you know, that good technical expertise or that sort of long-term view of looking at things. Where you said like the U.S. are a little more practical, and you guys might be more conceptual, but I don't really see it again. I interview a lot of startups. I'm not quite sure I see it as that black and white. Is there, other than just putting a lot of cheese on that burger, is there any other nuances or any other secret sauce that you'd like to share with the audience before we close this thing out about how you got to where you are?
About the tech for good, again, I think Europeans are more, I don't say passionate, but more involved in mission-driven companies today, impact companies, and for all these ESG investments. Even if we see things going in the US, there is something in terms of mindset and spirit for impact that is maybe going bigger today in Europe, and again, this mindset could also come to the US, where, as you said earlier, they need practical stuff, and when it's working, you need to have the economics working, and if it has a positive impact, that's fine, but it's not impact first, and then we see if the economics are working. So there is something when you can maybe move more the walls around you with this mindset about impact that is bigger today in Europe, a bit more advanced. It's maybe one of the few things where we are more advanced today than in the US. But still, we need absolutely this entrepreneurial spirit you find in the US, especially for the capital market.
I have two more questions that popped up if we do have time. One was what US strengths and assets should a French company look for in the US to expand on the US market, just to make the burger, they said.
I mean, one thing that's important, I don't know if it's a strength or an asset, but it's something you need, is when you move to the US or when you enter the US market, you need to build credibility, because the US market is very US centric. Like there's plenty of US companies. And so that's why you see so many French companies and European companies raise funding from a big US investor, like a reputable US investor. That's a way to build credibility. It's important also to have real presence. I think in our field, at least when you need to sell a lot to US customers, it's important to have at least one of the founders in the US to invest, to build a team, to have some form of headquarters in the US, regional headquarters at least, and inspire confidence to the US customers.
Okay. And another question, does cost drive your strategy to hire engineers in France? And do you think there's a hidden overhead to hiring engineers in France? And the last part of that question was, how do you estimate that?
I'd say cost is not the driving factor for hiring engineers in France. The driving factor is hire enough of the right people. And we still hire, quite a bit in France, we hire quite a bit in the US, we hire quite a bit in other places. If cost was the reason, we'd go somewhere else, right? I mean, France is not the cheapest market in the world. In terms of overhead, there's no, real overhead. I mean, yes, when you look at the total cost of an engineer in France, it's higher than the salary that people get. Taxes are higher. There's a number of other things you factor in because of labor laws. But it's not like it's just a cost of doing business. It's not something that is traumatic in any way for a US company, which is interesting. I'll tell you a story. When I told my US board, that we're going to open a big engineering office in France, they all lined up to talk to me. It was as if I told them we were opening an office in North Korea, and they all had a story to tell me about the time somebody did something horrible to them in France with the labor laws. And it turns out it hasn't been an issue at all. It turns out it's fine. It turns out everybody is working with it perfectly well in France, and I would say it's been an advantage for us to understand that and to be able to get that going and to really be able to take advantage of the talent pool in France.
That's great. I had to turn okay. I know this isn't a question, but this person keeps posting in here, and I just feel like you guys need to see it. Datadog and Insect, we love you, like with a lot of hearts. And one of the things I really love is about all the reactions in here, about all the love that these. It's great to see this because you guys are two very different companies. Now, is all this love, do you think, because you're French? You must have a lot of fans. So I guess there's no more questions. Oh, wait, there is one more question, and then I think we have to wrap it up. Have you run into any challenges with your American counterparts learning how to communicate with your French counterparts and vice versa? If so, what are your top 3 suggestions to help facilitate a culture of understanding or communication? That's a good one. That's a good question.
That's a great question. I mean, we cheated a little bit because we had when we started the team in Paris, we started it with people who came from New York, who are French, or who had worked in New York for a while. And so we had the same basis for the culture in both places. And we actually worked really hard to make sure people felt treated as equal between the different countries. And it started with a stupid detail. So, for example, we built a kitchen in the office in Paris. We built it the exact same way as the one we had in New York. We actually had the same tiles on the wall, so that it looks the same, so that nobody feels like they're getting something worse than they are.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so you wanted to avoid the satellite office feeling.
So top 3, can you give these guys three suggestions to help facilitate cultural and mutual understanding besides a kitchen?
Well, the kitchen is one, and it's very important.
Kitchen's number 1, right?
Strongly advised. Starting the team, like seating the team with people from the other office is important.
Okay.
And having frequent exchanges, like we actually do have frequent exchanges between the offices, so people meet in person, not anymore, of course, but
okay.
That will come back, so people can meet the others in person. And by the way, it's something everybody wants. Like if you sell on the transatlantic relationship and having some people spend a bit of time in the other offices, you also select the right kind of entrepreneurial spirits. And what else would I say? Look, there's no secret, lots of communication. Like you have people spend a lot of time with each other. You explain to them that they're going to be different. You make sure that you get in front of all of the small issues you might see. I mean, with Slack, the good thing is you'll see a lot of the issues pop in public, in these chat rooms.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to act on them on a regular basis.
And I think a kitchen's a great way to make that happen. So bravo to you. And Antoine, what are your top 3? I think we literally have something like 30 seconds before they cut us off.
It's quite impossible to tell you because my team is so small in the US today. So no, we indeed as food is key for us. We say the same as the cuisine. The kitchen is always the key part for French people.
Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe with some French from insect flour in the bread, as someone on the.
Yeah, I saw that one too. Yeah. So I think we've come to the end. I saw somebody else pop on the screen, and maybe we're not to the end. It looks like we were at the end, and now they've gone away. So
I'm back.
You're back. Okay. You want to close us out?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Reza Malikzadeh. I'm the president of the French Tech in San Francisco. And we're really thrilled to finish this first French Tech America Online Summit with such a brilliant panel. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you, Olivier. Thank you, Antoine. Your insights and sharing was great for the audience. All of the 20 panels that we had today will be soon available in replay on the French Tech America YouTube channel. So all of this awesome content will be available for consumption by those who missed some of the panels. And I want, on behalf of the whole French Tech communities in North America, to thank all of the 50+ speakers that we had who made time in their incredibly busy agenda to share their experience and knowledge with us today. It was really great to hear directly from these entrepreneurs, these industry experts, these investors. And thank you also to our partners, Wisembly, Egg Events, French Morning, and Business France, as well as the French Tech Mission in Paris, who all of them made this possible. Finally, very, very grateful for the 12 hard at work volunteers and helpers who did an incredible job making this day possible. All of this was done by this army of volunteers. So Celia Sengar-Louasil, Marine de Rosen, Eleonore Bertouille, Elodie Petri, Laura Ali, Antoine Abriba, Caroline Coiffard, Armel Lévy, Olivia Garsala, Jean-Baptiste Civil, and Roxana Bartolome. Thank you very much, all of you. Have a great day and go the French Tech. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you, bye.